My name is Erica Dawson, and I am 39 years old. For nearly 2 decades, I have served as an officer in the United States Army, a path I chose because I wanted to dedicate my life to something bigger than myself. When people ask me why I joined, I usually smile and say it was a mix of duty and stubbornness, though if I am being honest, it was also because I wanted to prove I could hold my own in a world that rarely shows mercy. My brother David has never understood that choice. To him, the military has always been a backup plan for people who could not make it in the so-called real world. Every time he introduced me to his friends, he would tilt his head with that familiar smirk and reduce my work to a punchline. He built a career in tech, and from his lofty perspective, my life looked small, dusty, and unimpressive. I learned to brush it off most of the time, to laugh when he mocked the uniform that means everything to me. Still, there are nights when his words echo louder than I want to admit. I wonder if he or anyone in my family will ever see me for who I really am. Not the caricature he paints at cocktail parties. Maybe the better question is this: how long does it take before the truth finally forces people to look at you differently? The call came on a Friday afternoon, just as the desert sun was turning my office windows into sheets of blinding light. My phone buzzed, and when I saw David's name, I already knew his voice would carry that familiar tone, half warm and half patronizing. "Erica," he said, dragging out the syllables like he was indulging a child. "Listen, I need a favor. Are you anywhere near civilization this weekend?" I leaned back in my chair, listening to the creak of the old leather. Out here, surrounded by nothing but sand and sky, civilization was always a relative term. "Depends on your definition," I told him. "I'm at work, what's going on?" His chuckle slid through the line, that polished sound that always managed to coat his words with both amusement and pity. "I'm in Vegas for the Defense Innovation Summit. Big keynote tomorrow. Thought it would be fun for the kids if you gave us a little tour. Show them some tanks or whatever it is you do out there." His words landed like stones in my chest. To him, my job had always been a novelty, something quaint and outdated, never worth taking seriously. He loved to reduce years of service to something that could fit in a gift shop brochure. "David, it's not a theme park," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "It's a secure military installation. I can't just walk civilians in because you think it'll be fun." His laugh came again, softer, but sharper this time. "Oh, come on, don't be so rigid. You're what, a logistics manager or something? I'm sure you can pull some strings." That single word, logistics, was his favorite weapon. He wielded it like a way to strip my work of meaning, to make me sound like a glorified office clerk in combat boots. "The kids think what you do is cute," he added, layering on the insult by using his son's voice as a cover for his own disdain. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the heat rise in my chest. It was never enough for him to dismiss me in private. He had made it a sport to humiliate me in public, too. I remembered the last family gathering at his mansion, where he had introduced me to one of his colleagues. "This is my sister Erica," he said, smiling widely. "She chose a different path, less about innovation, more about following orders. We're proud of her service, of course." The silence that followed told the truth. They were not proud. They were embarrassed. I kept breathing slowly, steadying myself the way the Army had taught me to do under pressure. "I can't do it, David," I said finally. "It's not possible." His sigh came through the line, long and theatrical, as if I had failed him once again. "Fine. I was just asking. Anyway, I comped you a suite at the Bellagio. My treat. The least you can do is show up for my keynote tomorrow. Try to look sharp, and maybe leave the uniform at home this time." I hung up before he could say more. The quiet of the desert pressed in around me, the silence almost mocking. Every time he spoke, he reminded me of how little he thought of me, how convinced he was that my life was smaller than his. Yet beneath my anger, something else was starting to stir. He wanted me to see the future of defense. I would, and so would he. David never missed a chance to remind me that his world was bigger and brighter than mine. Before we hung up that afternoon, he shifted gears into full salesman mode, bragging about the keynote he was about to deliver. "This is the big one, Erica," he said with the kind of excitement he usually reserved for closing investors. "The generals will be there. Pentagon brass. Everyone who matters. You don't want to miss it." I let him talk, listening to him spin his story of how his company's software was about to change the future of warfare. He spoke like a man convinced the entire defense world was already bending to his will. The more he bragged, the calmer I became, because I knew something he did not. "Make sure you show up," he added, lowering his voice as if we were sharing a secret. "And do me a favor. Don't wear the uniform this time. You know how it looks. Just wear something simple so you don't stand out. I don't want people thinking you're here in an official capacity. It would be awkward." His words carried that same edge of condescension that had followed me for years, as if my service was nothing more than a costume that embarrassed him in front of his powerful friends. "Of course," I said softly. My tone was even, almost agreeable, but inside, my pulse was steady with a different kind of energy. He thought he was coaching me on how to fit into his world. He had no idea that I was preparing to walk into mine. That night, I lay out a simple black dress, something that gave me no rank, no insignia, nothing to identify me as anyone important. I looked at it for a long time, imagining the moment I would step into that ballroom. He would see what he wanted to see. His younger sister finally playing along, finally blending into the crowd. What he would not see, not until it was far too late, was the truth waiting underneath. The army had taught me patience and discipline, skills David had never learned in his rush to charm his way to the top. I had no need to match his arrogance with my words. All I had to do was wait. And when the moment came, the silence I carried would speak louder than any speech he had ever given. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and the hum of 1,000 conversations. Executives in tailored suits clustered with generals in their dress uniforms, a swirl of polished confidence and ambition. I slipped in quietly, dressed in black, unmarked and anonymous, and scanned the crowd until I saw David holding court near the stage. He was in his element, a storm of handshakes and laughter, radiating the kind of charisma that had always made people lean closer. When his eyes landed on me, his smile widened, indulgent and proud, in the way a man might look at a pet trick he was about to show off. He waved me over with the flourish of someone convinced he was doing me a favor. "There she is," he boomed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as though I were a guest of honor. "General Harris, Mr. Dalton, I'd like you to meet my little sister, Erica." His tone was warm on the surface, but underneath it lay the same sharp edge I had known all my life. The general, a man I had briefed not long ago in a secure room miles away from this glitzy stage, kept his expression neutral. He nodded politely. "Ma'am." "Mr." Dalton offered a thin smile, though his eyes flickered with recognition. They both knew me, but they followed my lead, saying nothing. David kept going, oblivious. "She holds down the fort for the army," he said, chuckling. "A real boots-on-the-ground type. Probably keeps the supply closets organized, right?" He winked at the general, as if sharing an inside joke at my expense. My blood chilled, but I didn't move. He had always done this, using me as the punchline that made him seem bigger. I could feel the laughter he was fishing for hanging in the air, but it never came. The general's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Dalton's smile froze in place. Still, David plowed on. "It's funny, really," he added. "Here I am talking about revolutionizing the future of defense with next-gen technology, and my sister is still working with systems that might as well run on Windows 95. He laughed at his own joke, patting my shoulder like I should laugh too. Inside, humiliation pressed down like a weight, bitter and metallic on my tongue. Every word was designed to shrink me, to strip away the years of work, the sacrifices, the late nights under desert stars, where I fought to make sure soldiers had what they needed to survive. He wanted me to be the comic relief in his performance. I steadied my breathing, the way the army had taught me, when the noise of battle threatened to overwhelm. My face stayed calm, my voice silent. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Patience, I reminded myself. Discipline. Two things he had never understood. The general glanced at me again, just for a moment, his eyes carrying a flicker of acknowledgement. He knew exactly who I was. He knew this was theater, and he respected the fact that I was letting it play out. That tiny recognition gave me strength. David finally released me from his grip, leaning close enough for only me to hear. "See? This is where real decisions get made," he whispered, his breath hot with triumph. "Pay attention. You might learn something." He patted my cheek and turned away, dismissing me as though I had vanished. I stepped back into the crowd, my heart pounding, not with shame, but with something sharper. The sting of his words still burned, but underneath the burn was steel. Let him think I was invisible. Let him think I was nothing more than a prop in his story. The time would come when he would see the truth, and when it did, the silence I carried tonight would turn into a voice he could not ignore. The lights dimmed, and the crowd settled as David took the stage like he was born to own it. He moved with the ease of a man who believed every eye in the room belonged to him. His voice filled the ballroom, polished and booming, and the audience leaned in as if he were revealing secrets that would change the world. He started with sweeping statements about the future of warfare, painting pictures of battles won before they began. Words like paradigm shift and game-changing advantage rolled off his tongue, strung together in a symphony of buzzwords. He promised clarity, certainty, and victory, all wrapped neatly in the software his company had built. The screens behind him lit up with slick graphics, soldiers glowing with augmented awareness, maps that pulsed with real-time intelligence, simulations of battlefields where chaos vanished under the glow of his technology. It was a performance, and he was the star. The crowd responded with nods and murmurs, seduced by the shine of the show. And then, as if he had rehearsed the line for weeks, he shifted gears. "My own sister serves in the army," he said, pausing for dramatic effect. "She works tirelessly, boots on the ground, doing the kind of thankless tasks that keep things running. I want her and every soldier like her to have the advantage only we can provide." The audience laughed softly, charmed by his folksy humility. I sat frozen, my jaw tight. He had turned me into a prop, a convenient story to make his pitch more human. He held me up not as an equal, but as a symbol of what needed saving. The soldier stuck in the mud who needed his brilliance to light the way. The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost choke on it. He strutted across the stage, arms wide as if embracing the future. "We aren't just selling software," he declared. "We are selling certainty. We are selling victory." The room erupted in applause, his timing flawless. For a moment, you would think the contract was already his, the billion-dollar prize within reach. I kept my face still, my hands folded in my lap. Outwardly, I was another quiet figure in the audience. Inside, something colder had settled in me. Sharper than anger. He thought he was standing at the peak of his power. He thought he had already won. But the higher he climbed in this moment, the harder he would fall when the truth finally reached him. The conference room was a world away from the glitzy ballroom. No chandeliers, no applause, just wood-paneled walls and a long table where decisions with real weight were made. I set my government-issued laptop on the polished surface and looked around at the faces waiting for me. General Harris sat across from me, his expression sharp but measured. Beside him was Mr. Dalton, the civilian official who had politely shaken my hand earlier while pretending not to know me. Two members of my evaluation team were also present, a colonel and a data scientist who had spent months at my side, tearing through every line of David's code. "Major Dawson," the general said, his tone clipped and formal. "We appreciate your time. Please proceed." I nodded once, opened my laptop, and let the screen fill with the evidence we had gathered. For 20 minutes, I spoke with the steady precision of someone who had rehearsed every line. I laid out the vulnerabilities we had uncovered, flaw after flaw, that exposed the truth behind the shiny presentation. The system looked good on the surface, but inside it was a house built on sand. I showed how it depended on civilian networks that would collapse in the first moments of real conflict. I pointed to the latency issues, the lag that would cost soldiers their lives when seconds mattered most. I revealed the back doors, the cracks wide enough for an adversary with modest skill to exploit. Each slide, each chart, was another nail driven into the coffin of Nexus dynamics. My voice stayed even, calm, almost detached. But the silence in the room told me the weight of my words was crushing. David's dazzling promises had dissolved into vulnerabilities that could not be ignored. When I finished, I closed my laptop with deliberate calm. The room stayed quiet, heavy with the shift that had just taken place. I was no longer the sister dismissed as quaint. I was Major Erica Dawson, head of the Army's evaluation team, and the future of his empire was already gone. The door opened with a soft click, and David strode in as if the room already belonged to him. His face was still flushed with the triumph of his keynote, his smile wide, his stride confident. He stopped dead when his eyes landed on me sitting at the head of the table. For a heartbeat, he looked confused, like he had walked into the wrong room. Then his eyes darted to the general, to Mr. Dalton, and back to me again. His smile faltered, slipping into a twitch that betrayed the first crack in his certainty. "Erica?" he said, his voice louder than it needed to be. "What are you doing here? Did you get lost on your way to the buffet?" His attempt at humor fell flat in the heavy silence. No one laughed. General Harris rose from his chair, his tone all business. "Mr. Dawson, we will not need much of your time. The technical review has already been completed. I believe you've met the head of our evaluation team." He gestured toward me, and every eye in the room turned with him. The blood drained from David's face. His jaw slackened as the truth crashed over him. "You?" he stammered, pointing at me as though the word itself might break if he spoke it too loudly. "You're the one." The sentence withered before it could find an ending. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I met his eyes with steady calm, my voice cold but clear. "Hello, David. This meeting is over." The silence that followed was complete. The kind of silence that erases everything that came before it. His empire of arrogance, his billion-dollar dream, all of it crumbled in that stillness. He stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound, the weight of humiliation settling on him like a physical blow. In that moment, he no longer saw his little sister. He saw the officer who had dismantled his future with nothing more than the truth. And for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to say. I gathered my laptop and stood, the scrape of my chair against the floor the only sound in the room. David was still frozen in place, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, his face a pale mask of disbelief. I didn't look back as I walked toward the door, because I knew what was behind me. The sight of his world collapsing was not something I needed to savor. The general nodded once in quiet respect as I passed. Mr. Dalton kept his gaze steady, offering the faintest hint of approval. My team packed up their notes without a word. The meeting had ended not with a dramatic argument, but with the unmistakable weight of finality. Outside the conference room, the buzz of the hotel returned, bright and careless. Guests chatted over coffee, reporters typed furiously into their laptops, and tourists wandered past on their way to the casino. For me, the noise only made the silence of the room I had left behind feel sharper. I had carried that silence like a weapon, and it had spoken louder than any defense my brother could have made. Walking through the lobby, I thought of every time David had dismissed me, every time he had cut me down with a smirk or a joke. For years, I had wondered if I would ever escape the shadow he cast over my family. I realized now I hadn't needed to escape it at all. I had dismantled it, piece by piece, with the work I had chosen and the discipline that kept me steady. Worth is not measured in applause or titles. It is built in the long nights of effort no one sees, in the choices to hold your ground when others dismiss you. My brother had built his world on arrogance, but mine had been built on patience and persistence. And today the difference showed. As I left the hotel, I felt no triumph in rubbing his defeat across the stage of my life. What I felt was calm, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you stood firm in who you are. That is what lasts when the noise fades. So, I want to ask you, have you ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or mocked, only to prove your true value when it mattered most? If you have, share your story because someone out there needs to hear it.